Talking Business on Radio Q.
Joining me now is Peter Tran, who's Senior Director, Worldwide Advanced Cyber Defence Practice at RSA Security in Boston. G'day, Peter. Thanks for joining us from Boston.
Good to be here with you, Alan.
Now, Peter, we recently had a distributed denial of service attack on our census run by the Australian Bureau of Statistics. Could you tell us first, what is a distributed denial of service attack, DDoS?
Sure. In simple terms, a distributed denial of service attack is analogous to your home taking on an excess amount of water. And in that case, a network taking on an excess amount of water or flooding and has no way to channel that water out. So in terms of the census or ABS, they're taking an excess amount of traffic just overflowing or overwhelming the network, so they don't know what to channel that off, so they just shut down.
So why does someone do that? Why did anyone do that to the ABS?
So there's a couple of trends, really, to give you more context on the cyber attack landscape. The trending has occurred where day to day we see intrusions, they just happen. And then we start to see this evolution of disruptive attacks, and that's what you're seeing at the census, and then start to escalate into potentially more destructive types of attacks. There's a couple of motives. Some are blended. Some hacktivists want to make a loud and proud statement of saying, look, I can take you down, census. You have this big effort going on. It's a first of its kind, a census night, and I'm going to do this, and we're going to take you down. Other times, there's a mix. We can take you down. You won't come back up unless you pay, right? There's some kind of negotiation that we're going to continue to take your infrastructure down. And oftentimes, there might be another ulterior motive. We will take you down, create a bunch of noise, and meanwhile be able to breach your networks and create a foothold for the long term in another sense. So they might go quiet on one side and then really noisy with the DDoS on the other.
So does it cost very much for someone to do that?
Not at all. You have, in essence, tools that can start creating this random traffic, this automated traffic in large amounts to be able to just sheerly overwhelm. It's like having billions of computers working for you globally over the World Wide Web that just start sending these requests over and over and over again. So you get economies of scale and sheer capacity with just simple tools.
Well, it's very puzzling. I mean, I suppose what you have is people who just feel like doing it. Is that right? I mean, who just want to, you called it loud and proud. I mean, these are people who just want to show off. Is that right?
Oh, denial of service attacks have been around for a long time, and it starts out with the show off. I'm going to take down a website. I'm going to take down your personal social media account just because I can. But now a website is not just a website. There are services, just like the census has a infrastructure behind its website. So in the World Wide Web, it used to be you go to a place just to get very static data. And in this case, you have access to a myriad of types of services and data behind that. So there are higher stakes here. With the census in particular, you had several rounds of attacks, so to speak, until the census decided to self-impose this blackout to perform the investigation. So it's hard to determine now the motives until we start to see how that investigation unfolded and what, in essence, they could determine from attribution, motive, and what key in that case is how much of the data did they have access to that they self-imposed a blackout, that they can determine what the true cause was.
There's been quite a bit of criticism of the ABS for not anticipating that. What would you have done if they'd brought you in, say, a month before the census was due to happen, to prepare them? What would you have done?
So I wanted to step back a bit and give you some context. RSA conducted what was called a Cyber Security Poverty Index. And in that data, we had over 81 countries. Over 75% were ill-prepared for and had significant risk exposure. In the Asia-Pacific region, to include Australia, that was 74%. So it's not far off from our global data. If I were going in there, it's preparedness, practice, test, model, under duress, well in advance of going live in the census. And that being that much of this denial of service attack traffic can be anticipated for when you start doing early detection and monitoring and response. That type of traffic has a certain behavior. And if you're looking for it, you can prepare, you have redundant systems. It's a game of capacity at the end, right? More bandwidth technically. You build more sandbags up. There's only so many you can build up in the heat of the attack itself. But preparedness, testing, and test again is absolutely essential in this case.
But given the trend of this sort of attack and the numbers of them, should the ABS have known such a thing was going to happen?
It's certainly what I characterize as table stakes. And when you have such a high profile around the census night, and this is the first of its kind, no longer going paper, and being able to have this, you're creating quite a bit of mind share around that. So you're in essence, it's public pride, and so in the hacker community, it's somewhat of an invitation. It is an invitation for those that want to say, look, if you're that good, I'm going to test you out. Or if you're that good, we also want to see what your infrastructure, what else it might have.
So you're more than a sitting duck. You're sending out an invitation to be hacked, to be DDoS'd.
Oh yeah, it's more than just a paper invitation to a party. It's a evite over the internet, right? It's just there. So having a plan, a remediation, and a fallback plan is so essential when you're going to go that public with an infrastructure, any infrastructure. This is globally. We see this at RSA on a global scale. Banking, any of the critical infrastructure, healthcare. This is essential table stakes. It's a foundation.
So obviously the ABS census one was a big high-profile thing, but what sort of companies, what sort of operations are subject to denial-of-service attacks?
I'll give you a perfect example. So when you search for, when people search on the net, they usually go to...
I Google it.
I Google it, of course. I Google it. So when Google, and this is tested, right? When Google goes down for 5 minutes, 40% of the World Wide Web gets affected because we depend on it. So even Google, Yahoo, Bing, Microsoft, any major Amazon web services, anybody that holds a major infrastructure is prone to this. So you better believe someone like Google, when you look at over 60 trillion websites that it crawls over time, you look at over 100 billion monthly searches, that amounts to 2.3 million a second. They can't afford to be down. They can't afford to take unnecessary. So when we search, when we make a request to Google, they certainly can be the number one target. Say, hey, I took Google down. Guess what? I affected 40% of the World Wide Web. So they test. Right? They test regularly. They test under stress to not have that happen.
Now, a DDoS, a denial-of-service attack, is not exactly a hack, is it? Could you explain the difference?
So a hack is an attempt to take advantage of a vulnerability or an exploit so that you can gain access, so that be intrusive. A DDoS, or a denial of service, is a attempt to disrupt. Attempt to disrupt a service, a backbone. So there's not necessarily an intrusion into the network, and it's not necessarily at all that any data has been stolen or exfiltrated from that data. So from a cyber hacking, cyber attacker perspective, it's a different look and feel. However, a denial of service attack can allow hacking or breaches into it because you're overwhelming the network in such a way where it may create vulnerabilities and exploits for the follow-on breaches that could occur. So they do go somewhat hand in hand.
Right, and both of is it fair to say that both denial of service and hacks are increasing?
They certainly are increasing, and they're increasing in significant complexity. So you no longer have a denial of service attack that has a single methodology. They're using cloud services, so it's an increase, almost 33% of cloud infrastructure and services that are now targeted by denial of service, mainly because IT infrastructures are migrating so rapidly to hybrid cloud as the new infrastructure for global economy, global IT infrastructure is banking across the board. So we're seeing complexities increase. We're seeing that the motives are changing. They're becoming more blended, not as clear to determine. But we do know that they're occurring with greater frequency, and they're occurring in greater complexity. The preparedness and the modeling of these types of attacks is so essential going forward for any business.
We're going to have to leave it there, Peter, but it's been fantastic talking to you. Thanks very much.
I appreciate it, Alan. Thank you for having me.
I've been talking to Peter Tran, who's the Director of the Worldwide Advanced Cyber Defense Practice at RSA Security in Boston.